All right. Yes, perfect. So forecast. And if we look at the dollar first, then we can see currently that we are continuing lower overall. So at this moment, we came into the 4-hour value gap. We are leaving behind a very small daily value gap now. I do not think we are going to come back towards that daily value gap unless we reach the low, get a big aggressive reaction higher. That could be the case. But I do think that we might reach this low right here. So that will be my main target throughout the week right there. So in order for us to reach that, I would like to see, so overnight here, if we can, if I can wake up and I can see 4-hour value gaps lower, we can trade off of that lower as well. That could be very interesting overall. So more so utilizing the 4-hour here to first off reach this low, then reach that low right there. At this moment in time, we came into the 4-hour value gap, continued lower off of that. At that moment, we did not really create a 4-hour value gap lower. So at that moment, I was like, all right, we might actually come higher into the at least that high to potentially continue lower or into the weekly value gap. Now, the weekly value gap currently is quite far. So I'm not expecting this week to really trade into it myself. Maybe after we reach this first discount rate and then we can continue higher. Or even if we reach the previous week low right there to then potentially look to continue higher. It's still very much a difficult situation, as in we really need to read on whatever it wants to do. Ideally, I want to see price action close below. So a body close below right there, below those lows, creating an overlapping fair value gap to then continue lower off of that. That is my ideal scenario. Would love to see that as well. Then here on ES, NASDAQ and YM, it's currently not really a lot going on. Now on NASDAQ right here, we still have this weekly value gap. We need to understand as well, it's what we touched on in the enrollment video actually, which is quite interesting, that overall the bullish price action is of course higher probability. So to target the bullish price action is higher probability right now to target the highs, etc. But we can potentially look to trade into the weekly value gap if we get very, very clear signs. Currently, the clear signs are not really there. I would like to see either 1-hour value gaps lower, 15-minute, maybe an ST plus a relower to get the full confidence going that we actually want to target the weekly value gap overall. So currently, the price action is still a little bit tricky. It's a little bit tricky and not too certain on what we want to do overall with the dollar and the indices as well. So that is mainly what I'm looking at. Still waiting here. Nothing really clear just yet. Very slow start to the week. And then if we look at DAX as well, same scenario where it's currently just a very slow start to the week right here. Nothing much going on just yet. Australian dollar, US dollar, which was really interesting today actually already because we had Australian dollar news, some US dollar news as well, if I'm not mistaken. We talked about the 4-hour value gap. That created a new 4-hour value gap off of that as well. So if you were able to catch those entries, then great stuff. Great stuff right there. I did not get involved myself. Let's see if it did provide anything clean. Not the cleanest. Did play out, but overall just really not that clean. This as well, 4-hour. If you waited for London right there, eventually you got London. Fair value as well. Could have been cleaner overall, but not too bad. Not too bad price action. Now afterwards, let's see if we can create a daily fair value gap higher right now as well once we reach those targets, and see if we can continue higher off of those to potentially reach for the next daily fair value gap that is higher as well right there to the left. So let's look at EU, and EU right here, not creating a daily value gap higher, at least not yet. So on the 4-hour, we could potentially, after sweeping this low, which is not too bad price action, if we can create a 4-hour value gap higher right there, that could be quite interesting going into tomorrow as well. With the dollar lining up for that weekly target, that could be quite interesting. So I'm definitely going to add it to the list. Then GU is creating that daily fair value gap right there, which again could also be quite interesting to continue higher off of that. So this is also ready to go onto the long list. New Zealand dollar, US dollar did not create a daily fair value gap higher overall. It did, again, what we talked about, right? Where it's creating that weekly value gap potentially. So again, still the intention to be bullish is there. 4-hour value gaps could be nice to continue higher off of. The only thing is that we do really need a clear target. which could have been nice if we created daily fair gap, because then the target is way more clear as well. Then USD Canadian dollar, I'm going to add New Zealand dollar to the long list, but overall will not be at the top of my interest list. USD Canadian dollar right here can continue lower as well. 4 hour with the overlapping lows right there, 4 hour value gaps with the overlapping lows. If we create 4 hour value gaps lower, then again, that would still be nice, because this is just a very nice fake bottom that is sitting right there that we can definitely look to target as well. So this is overall looking quite nice. Even 1 hour value gaps lower, potentially in London already, to continue lower off of that. That could actually already be quite nice if you're using a flow trading plan in that sense as well. So going to add it to the short list. Then USD CHF, nothing much just yet. I doubt that this will even come into the weekly value gap this week to continue lower. So overall, if this creates a daily value gap lower, could be quite nice. In the meantime, just waiting. US dollar JPY. Let's see. So this again, with the dollar being bearish potentially, then this ST is not really an ST you want to trade off of. And overall, the shorts are also not really clear. Although with the dollar going lower, then this could be quite nice to continue lower as well. Just the overall price action is just not really great. So daily value gap lower, something that could be interesting, but I definitely think there are higher probability pairs out there currently. So silver right here is exploding higher actually. That's quite interesting. Quite interesting right now, where we are pretty close to the target already. Daily value gap is quite far though to retrace into that to then continue higher. So even 4 hour value gap potentially to continue higher off of that could be quite interesting looking at it tomorrow. Then gold right here. Gold, I would prefer a daily value gap that is overlapping with this high right there. Coming back into that mitigation block with an overlapping value gap to then continue higher off of that. That could also be quite nice. But in the meantime, we could already do that off the 4 hour right there, where the 4 hour may want to continue already higher right there. Which could also be quite interesting. Then on Bitcoin, nothing much just going on. Nothing much just yet. Crude oil as well, waiting for a daily value gap higher or lower. In the meantime, just nothing interesting. Nifty as well, nothing really interesting just yet. Still waiting. All right, let's look at the short list. Canadian dollar CHF. So let's see where we are at. We are currently not in the weekly value gap just yet. So still waiting right here for us to come into that. If we come into that, that could be very interesting overall. All right, then Euro GBP. Let's see what we are doing. Not creating a daily value gap lower, which is a bit of a shame. Not creating a 4 hour value gap lower as well. All right, then we just wait. We don't do anything just yet. All right, perfect. USD Canadian dollar is what we talked about, right? Where it could be quite interesting actually. And if this creates a 4 hour value gap lower, I would prefer this over Euro GBP and Canadian dollar CHF right there. Just purely because it's already giving that setup. Then for the long list, which was very long, but I believe we can remove quite some pairs. Euro Canadian dollar, still waiting, so still nothing really going on. Euro JPY, let's see. Did not create the daily value gap right there. And if anything at that moment in time, it seems like we are not really following through. So you might actually want to sort of use that disrespect boundary right now, that unusual context to your advantage, where you go into the lower time frame right now, into the 4 hour, to look for that usual context lower right there. So that could be potentially interesting. Overall, I'll put it back on the waiting list to get a little bit more clear indication on what it actually wants to do right here, but I don't want to trade it. GJ as well is not creating that daily value gap higher. So the daily value gap is not overlapping with those highs. Meaning that right here, I do think that price is waiting for the monthly value gap to be created and then sting into that to continue higher. So right here, you might see some weird price action where even here, we are not creating a weekly value gap higher. Meaning that again, we could have that disrespect boundary to actually continue lower overall. So that's definitely something to take into account. Where if you were to take a trade right here, then even the closest drawn liquidity would be that daily value gap, small daily value gap right there. Overall, going to put it on a waiting list as well. Not really interested in this. Australian dollar JPY. currently coming into that daily fair gap to then continue higher off of that potentially. So let's see on the 4 hour, what do we have? We did not create a 4 hour fair gap higher. On the 50 minute, did we already get the entry? Seems like we already did. Very high entry though, which I do not really like myself. But right there, if we can create 4 hour fair gaps higher or any fair gap higher right there, eventually could be interesting. But right here, the rejection lower is a bit worrying, is a bit suspicious right there. So overall won't be at the top of my interest list as well. And CHF JPY, let's see. Almost coming into the daily fair gap. Let's see what it wants to do there tomorrow. So this was definitely pretty high on the interest list right now. Could be quite interesting overall. Then Australian dollar, US dollar is what we talked about as well. Now, this will not be very high on the interest list as well, purely because it delivered on what we mentioned yesterday. Right now, I want to take a small step back to potentially get involved in a new daily fair gap, which is going to take another day, of course. Same for silver and gold right there. I want to take it a little bit easier. Australian dollar, Canadian dollar. So let's see. This is what we talked about, that weekly fair gap, which is just, it's a bit of a weird formation, but it's not a formation where I'm very confident in sticking into the fair gap to then continue higher. So overall, we could even create a daily fair gap higher right there to continue higher off of that. So here again, it's more so waiting. So I'm also going to put it on the waiting list because it's just not super clear right there. Australian dollar CHF did not create a daily fair gap overall. Now on the 4 hour as well, not the cleanest price action. So here I'm going to put it on the waiting list as well, just to refine the list a little bit more, because also this is just not super clear. Currently, we can still continue higher, but I just want to that clear daily fair gap higher as well to support the ID. Then on Canadian dollar JPY, this is what we mentioned, right? Where overall we had second short conditions. So this sweep to then potentially continue higher was very tempting. But overall, that daily fair gap higher needed to confirm it. So that was the sort of idea behind it as well. If we can create that, then it's the first time we actually confirmed order flow, which currently, again, we are just simply not doing. So right here, I also don't really want to get involved and want to put it back on the waiting list as well. Then New Zealand dollar CHF. Let's see. This is also not creating a daily fair gap higher. 4 hour, if it creates 4 hour fair gaps higher, that could be quite interesting because the draw liquidity is quite close overall. So that could be quite interesting. Although again, just to prevent or that lack of that daily fair gap created higher is just not something I really like. As in, of course, I would always prefer that daily fair gap to just be created right there, which then is a little bit suspicious in my eyes right there. I don't really like that idea. Then also going to put it on the waiting list. New Zealand dollar JPY. Let's see. It's coming into that daily fair gap right there. This one did not come off a weekly fair gap or anything. That made it a little bit lower probability than some of the other pairs right there. But it did come into the daily fair gap. We are getting a nice rejection by the looks of it. So even again, the same story as what was it, Australian dollar JPY, I believe. If we can get nice fair gaps higher again right here, then that could be quite interesting to just follow through on price action higher. So overall, could still be quite interesting. Going to place it a little bit higher than New Zealand dollar JPY, I would argue almost, because the formation here is a little bit cleaner. Moi, I do say that, but is that true? I'm not too certain. They're pretty equal, Australian dollar JPY. The only differentiator that I could see is still that weekly fair gap on what is it? Did we come into the weekly fair gap? No, we did not. On both, on neither. All right, then both pretty equal right there, I would argue. Just waiting for it, a fair gap higher. EU as well is quite nice. I'm going to place it pretty high on the interest list, above Australian dollar JPY, a little bit below CHF JPY, just because it doesn't have a daily fair gap or anything. But with the drawn liquidity on the dollar, currently short term being quite clear, then I do believe we can confidently look to target this high right there. So that if that high, we get a 1 hour fair gap, 4 hour fair gap higher right there to target that high, I would say yes, that is a very nice trade to take overall. On GU, I also am going to place it pretty high, just a little bit below EU right there, because not too confident in what the dollar wants to do on the longer term right there. Short term, yes, pretty clear. Longer term, moi. is still very interesting though. Then New Zealand dollar, US dollar. This is not really interesting in my eyes, and I'm not really looking to trade it as well. So I'm going to place it on the waiting list for myself. So it's mainly the top 4 right there. Euro Canadian dollar, CHF JPY, EU and GU. And then USD Canadian dollar right there. So top 5 essentially is what I am interested in potentially. Even though EU and USD Canadian dollar did not create a daily fair value gap, I still think it can deliver towards that high. Pretty clear drawn liquidity overall on the 4 hour. So I do quite like that. So that's mainly what I'm looking at currently. And for USD CHF, Euro CHF, etc. is, I believe, what we already went over, right? So don't really need to dive deep into that as well. You actually see Euro CHF right there. I'm not sure if we went over it. Not too sure. Don't remember it, to be honest. So right here, we're still waiting for that weekly value gap. In the meantime, nothing interesting. GBP Canadian dollar, let's see, not coming into the weekly value gap overall right there. So this is where we are currently sweeping that high, and we are again not creating a new daily value gap higher. This is also where we mentioned this daily value gap can potentially push higher. We have the weekly value gap below it right there. So this weekly value gap can potentially look to be traded into overall, which could be quite interesting to now use that disrespect boundary right there. If we start seeing bearish price action on the 4 hour, for example, 4 hour value gaps lower right there, to then target that weekly value gap. That would be very interesting, to be honest. So I'm going to add it to the short list. If we get that, I would definitely be interested in this pair right here. Euro JPY, did we go over this right here? Yes, we went over it. So the rest, we went over it. All right, perfect. So that is currently what I am looking at. Let me place this GBP Canadian dollar. Also quite high on the interest list right there. All right, perfect. So that is currently what I am looking at. Perfect, thank you.